afraid of you?
No. I just thought you were smart.
The bass from the club speakers did not just vibrate in the air, it crawled under my skin, heavy and relentless. Onyx was the kind of Manhattan club where the velvet ropes actually meant something. The champagne here cost more than my monthly rent, and I was already 3 months behind on my apartment. I stood near the edge of the VIP section, gripping my clutch like a lifeline. The lights strobed in lazy arcs across the sweaty crowd, blue, then gold, then a deep blood red that made everyone look either beautiful or dangerous. Right now, Luca Vance looked like both. He was leaning back on a curved leather sofa. One arm was casually draped over a blonde in a dress so tight it was basically body paint. His other hand rested high on the thigh of a brunette. She whispered something in his ear, her lips brushing against his jaw. He laughed. That arrogant, low sound I used to think was charming. That was my first mistake, thinking a man like Luca could ever be anything but a predator. My fingers tightened around the stem of my empty glass. I owed him $20,000. It was supposed to be a loan to keep my freelance graphic design business afloat. He told me it was an investment in our shared future, but as I watched his hand slide higher up the brunette's leg, I realized the truth. He did not want a partner. He wanted a pet. My stomach twisted, hot and acidic. I was not heartbroken. I was furious. I turned on my heel and walked straight to the bar. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor, a sharp sound that felt satisfying. I slid onto a stool next to a brass pillar. Whiskey, I told the bartender, make it neat and make it something cheap, because I cannot afford to impress anyone tonight. He poured a double of something amber and smoky. I downed half of it in one swallow. It burned going down, scraping my throat in the best possible way. 8 months. 8 months of late-night conversations, skipped meals to meet his schedule, and endless broken promises, while he used me as a placeholder. The most dangerous mistake people make is believing that power protects you. Power does not protect you. It just changes what can hurt you. I looked back toward the VIP section. The blonde was sitting fully on his lap now. I need to do something stupid, I muttered to the empty air. I turned on the stool, scanning the dark edges of the room. And that is when I saw him. He was sitting 3 stools down, completely alone. One large hand rested over a glass of clear liquor. He was not looking at his phone. He was not talking to the bartender. He was just sitting there, perfectly still, like a statue carved from midnight. He was older than the finance bros swarming the floor. Mid-30s, maybe. Sharp jawline, thick dark hair, and a bespoke suit that screamed quiet wealth. He radiated danger, a quiet, terrifying kind of control. He looked bored, but his dark eyes were constantly tracking the exits. My heart started to pound. Adrenaline sharpened the edges of my vision, making the room fade away. I stood up and walked over. I stopped right in front of him, blocking his view of the door. He looked up. His eyes were pitch black. They locked onto mine with an intensity that literally stole the air from my lungs. He did not smile. He did not frown. He just waited. "I need a favor," I said, my voice shaking slightly. His gaze flicked down to my chest, taking in my rapid breathing, then back to my face. "I do not do favors." His voice was deep, a low rumble wrapped in a heavy Korean accent. "You have not heard what it is yet?" I pushed back. "It does not matter." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his solid chest, close enough to smell his cologne, a mix of crushed cedar and expensive smoke. "I need you to kiss me," I whispered. For a moment, he did not move. He did not even blink. Then, one corner of his mouth lifted. It was not quite a smile, more like the acknowledgement of a trap. "Why?" "Because my boyfriend is over there," I said, nodding toward the VIP section. He currently has his tongue down someone else's throat, and I want him to see me not give a damn. The man's dark eyes shifted over my shoulder. He stared at Luca for a fraction of a second. I did not know it yet, but he already knew exactly who Luca Vance was. So, this is revenge, he murmured. Closure, I corrected. I squared my shoulders, trying to look braver than I felt. Look, if you are not interested, just say so. I will find someone else. I started to turn away, but his hand shot out and caught my wrist. His grip was iron, hot and unbreakable. I did not say no. I looked down at his massive hand holding my wrist, then back up to his face. Something cold and lethal flashed in his eyes. He was measuring me, calculating the exact cost of what I was asking. "What is your name?" he asked. "L," I breathed. "L." He rolled the name over his tongue, tasting it. Then he let go of my wrist and stood up. He was massive, over 6 feet 2 inches of solid muscle and tailored wool. The sheer presence of him made my instincts scream to run. "This is a bad idea," he whispered, stepping into my space. "Probably," I managed to say. He tilted his head, his dark eyes dropping to my lips. "Then let us make it count." His large hand settled firmly on my waist. A jolt of pure heat shot down my spine, and then he kissed me. It was not soft. It was not a performance. His mouth took mine with absolute certainty, his other hand sliding to the small of my back to pull me flush against his hard chest. My breath hitched. My hands instinctively slid up his lapels, gripping the expensive fabric. The pounding bass of the club vanished. Luca vanished. There was only the suffocating tension, the taste of cold vodka, and the terrifying realization that I was drowning. When he finally pulled away, my chest was heaving. His eyes were fixed on mine, dark and completely unreadable. "Did that work for you?" he asked smoothly. I slowly turned my head. Luca was standing at the edge of the velvet rope. The girls were gone. He was staring straight at us, his face pale, his jaw locked in absolute fury. "Yeah," I whispered, my pulse hammering in my throat. "That works." The stranger stepped back, letting his hand fall away from my waist. The sudden loss of his heat made me shiver. "Good luck with that," he said quietly. He turned to walk away. "Wait," I called out, unable to stop myself. "What is your name?" He paused. He looked over his shoulder. The red strobe light washed over his sharp features. "Kang Dae-hyun," he said, and then he disappeared into the dark sea of bodies. I stood there for 10 full seconds. My lips were bruised and tingling. I thought I had just won. I thought I had taken back my control. Everything changed after that. I turned around to grab my purse, but Luca was already standing right behind me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin so hard I gasped. He did not look like a cheating boyfriend trying to apologize. He looked like a man staring at a ghost. "What the hell did you just do?" Luca hissed, his voice shaking. "Let go of me," I snapped, yanking my arm back. "We are done, Luca." His eyes were wild, darting toward the door where the stranger had vanished. "You stupid girl," he breathed, pure panic bleeding into his tone. "You have no idea who that was." My stomach dropped. The anger evaporated, replaced by a sudden, freezing dread. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Luca stepped closer, dropping his voice to a terrified whisper. "You did not just kiss a random guy at a bar, L. You just put your hands on the head of the Korean syndicate, and he does not leave loose ends." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I looked toward the exit, but the darkness had already swallowed him. I was a loose end, and I was about to find out exactly how men like Kang Dae-hyun tied them up. Luca stared at me like I was a ghost. His hand was still wrapped tight around my arm. The neon lights of the club flashed across his pale face, highlighting the sheer terror in his eyes. "You have no idea what you just did," he whispered again. I yanked my arm out of his grip. I do not care, Luca. We are done. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not ever come near my apartment again. His terror instantly hardened into something ugly and cruel. You think you can just walk away from me? You owe me $20,000, Elle. It is not a soft loan anymore. I want every single penny by tomorrow morning, or I will crush your little design business into dust. My chest tightened. I could barely afford groceries, let alone pay back $20,000 in 12 hours. You are out of your mind, I shot back. Watch me, he sneered. And watch your back, because you just put a target on it. I turned around and pushed my way through the heavy crowd. The bass pounded against my skull, syncing with my racing heartbeat. I shoved past the velvet ropes and stumbled out into the freezing Manhattan air. The sudden quiet of the street hit me like a physical blow. I crossed my arms over my chest, shivering in my thin silk dress. I needed to get to the subway. I needed to get home, lock my doors, and figure out how to disappear. I started walking down the damp pavement. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long, distorted shadows against the brick walls. I made it 2 blocks before I felt it, the prickle of eyes on the back of my neck. I slowed my pace. The street was empty, just the distant hum of traffic and the smell of wet asphalt. Then I heard it, footsteps. They were heavy and deliberate, scraping against the concrete behind me. When I sped up, the footsteps sped up. When I slowed down, they slowed down. Panic crawled up my throat, tasting like metal and fear. I dug into my purse with shaking hands, searching for my phone. My fingers closed around the cold metal just as the footsteps closed the distance. A heavy hand slammed onto my shoulder. I screamed and spun around. It was not Luca. It was a man in a dark hoodie, his face hidden in the shadows. He grabbed my phone out of my hand and threw it against the brick wall. The screen shattered into 100 pieces. "You are coming with me," he grunted, yanking me toward a dark alley. I fought back. I kicked and thrashed, my heels slipping on the wet pavement, but he was too strong. He wrapped an arm around my neck, cutting off my air. My vision started to blur. I didn't know it yet, but my life ended on that sidewalk, because right before everything went black, a shadow detached itself from the alley wall. It moved with terrifying speed. There was no warning, no shout, just the sickening sound of bones snapping in the dark. The man holding me let out a choked gasp and collapsed to the ground. I stumbled forward, falling to my knees, gasping for cold air. I looked up. Kang Dae-hyun stood over the unconscious body. He calmly adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke suit. He did not look like he had just broken a man in half. He looked like he was annoyed by the weather. "Get up," he said. His deep voice offered no comfort, only a command. I pushed myself up, my legs trembling so violently I could barely stand. "You followed me," I whispered, staring at the blood on his knuckles. "Someone followed you," he corrected, stepping closer. I simply waited for them to make a move. "Why?" My chest heaved. "Why do you care?" His dark eyes locked onto mine. "Because you touched me, Elle, and what touches me belongs to me." He reached out and wrapped his warm hand around my wrist. The heat of his touch sent a violent shiver down my spine. He pulled me toward the curb just as a sleek black luxury car pulled out of the shadows. The rear door opened. The driver, a sharp-featured Korean man in a black suit, stepped out. "Miss L," the driver said, bowing his head slightly. "Please get in." I froze. How does he know my name? Dae-hyun pushed me gently but firmly into the back seat of the car. "Shin knows everything I know," he said, sliding in beside me. "And I know everything about you. Elena Harper, 26 years old, graphic designer, and $20,000 in debt to a very dangerous idiot." The heavy door slammed shut, sealing us in the dark interior. The engine purred to life, and the car shot into the night. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You ran a background check on me. I ran it while I was tasting your lipstick," he murmured. He leaned back against the leather seat, watching me like a predator observing a trapped bird. The hardest lesson to learn in life is that the people who promise to save you usually demand the highest price. Where are you taking me? I asked, my voice trembling. To my home, he replied calmly. I am not going home with you. I snapped, finding a tiny spark of defiance. I need to go to my apartment. I need my things. Dae-hyun turned his head, his gaze pinning me to the seat. Your apartment is currently being watched by 3 men who want to put a bullet in your head. You are not going back there. You are staying with me. You cannot just kidnap me. He leaned in close, so close I could feel his breath ghosting over my lips. It is not kidnapping if I am keeping you alive. The car stopped. I looked out the tinted window. We were parked in front of a massive glass and steel high-rise in Tribeca, the kind of building where billionaires hid from the rest of the world. Shin opened my door. The cold night air rushed in, but I could not move. I looked at Dae-hyun. His face was an unreadable mask of cold authority. Are you coming? He asked. Stepping out onto the curb, I had no money. I had no phone. I had a stalker bleeding on a sidewalk and a furious ex-boyfriend hunting me. I had no choice. I stepped out of the car and followed the Korean Mafia boss into the building. The heavy glass doors slid shut behind me, and the lock clicked into place, with a sound that felt entirely too permanent. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, lethal whisper. Dae-hyun's penthouse was a sprawling fortress of black steel and floor-to-ceiling glass. It overlooked the dark waters of the Hudson River. It was beautiful, absolutely freezing, and completely empty, just like the man taking off his jacket in front of me. Take the guest room, he commanded, loosening his silk tie. Do not answer the door, do not go near the windows, and do not even think about running. I stood perfectly still in the center of the massive room. The heat radiating from his large frame was the only warm thing in the apartment. You cannot just lock me in a gilded cage. I have a business. I have a life. I need my computer. He paused, turning his head to look at me. His pitch-black eyes were hollow and calculating. Your life as you knew it is over. Elle, you belong to my world now. And in my world, you do exactly what you are told. Survival is never about fighting the monster in the dark. It is about figuring out which monster wants to feed you and which one wants to eat you. I spent the night shivering in a king-sized bed that smelled faintly of expensive smoke. I did not sleep a single wink. When the morning sun crept through the sheer curtains, I crawled out of bed. I found him standing in the massive kitchen. He was wearing a fresh charcoal suit, drinking black coffee. Morning, he murmured, not looking up from a sleek tablet. I walked over to the marble island, my bare feet silent against the cold floor. I need to check my bank account. My phone is broken. Please. He slid the tablet across the smooth marble without a word. I typed in my credentials with shaking fingers. The screen loaded. My breath caught in my throat. 0. My balance was absolute 0. Luca had not just threatened me. He had used his family connections to freeze my business accounts entirely. I was ruined. He drained it, I whispered, a single tear escaping down my cheek. I have nothing. No money, no phone, no way out. I am suffocating. Dae-hyun stepped around the counter. He moved with the silent grace of a predator closing in on its prey. He reached out, his rough thumb brushing the tear from my cheek. The sudden heat of his touch made my pulse hammer wildly. You do not need his money, he said softly. I own a private security firm. We handle high-profile threats, corporate espionage, and stalking. You have me. I pulled my face away, desperate to escape his intoxicating pull. I do not want your security firm. I want my own independence back. I spun around and marched toward the private elevator. Where are you going? His voice cracked like a whip. To the lobby, I shouted back, to get some air before I lose my mind in here. He did not stop me. He let the elevator doors close, a dark smirk playing on his lips. I should have known it was a trap. The lobby was entirely marble and empty. I stepped out, wrapping my arms around myself, gasping for normal air. "Excuse me, Miss Harper." I jumped. A man in a cheap gray suit stepped out from behind a massive pillar. He flashed a gold badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Special Agent Miller. My blood ran cold. The FBI. Why was the FBI looking for a freelance graphic designer? "We need to talk about Luca Vance," the agent said quickly, glancing nervously at the elevators. "You are in terrible danger. Luca is not just a rich kid playing with trust funds. He is washing dirty money for some very bad people." I stepped back, my chest tight with sheer panic. "I do not know anything about his money." "You designed his new corporate marketing files," the agent pressed, taking a step closer. "We know you have the original hard drive. Give it to us before the Korean syndicate tears you apart to get it, because the man upstairs, Kang Dae-hyun, his security firm is just a front. He is the devil himself." Before I could process a single terrifying word, the temperature in the room plummeted. A heavy, suffocating shadow fell over the lobby. "I believe the lady told you she does not know anything." Dae-hyun stood outside the open elevator. His hands were in his pockets, his face completely dead of emotion. The FBI agent went pale. He did not argue. He did not flash his badge again. He literally turned around and ran out the glass doors. Dae-hyun walked toward me, his heavy footsteps echoing like a countdown. He grabbed my waist, pulling my body flush against his rock-hard chest. His dark eyes were blazing with quiet fury. "I told you not to leave," he whispered against my lips. His breath was hot and dangerous. My heart beat frantically against his chest, like a trapped bird. He wasn't just protecting me from Luca, he was protecting me from myself. He dragged me back into the elevator. The ride up was thick with unbearable sensory tension. I could smell his dark cologne. I could feel the violent heat radiating off his skin. His large hand rested securely on the small of my back, branding me through my thin dress. I was terrified of him and completely addicted to the rush. When the doors opened, Shin was standing in the living room. He was holding a familiar black box. My heart stopped completely. It was my external hard drive. I retrieved it from her apartment. Shin bowed low. There were 3 armed men searching her building, but I was faster. Dae-hyun let go of my waist. He walked over to the sleek glass table and picked up the small drive. He turned it over in his massive hands. "The FBI wants this. Luca wants this. And my rivals want this." He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing into black slits. The air in the penthouse suddenly felt too thin to breathe. "What exactly did you design for him?" "L. Because you just became the most wanted woman in Manhattan." Dae-hyun plugged the black drive into his sleek laptop. The screen illuminated his sharp features in a cold blue glow. I stood frozen behind him, my breathing shallow. He hit a few keys. Lines of complex code began to rain down the screen. "What exactly did you design for Vance Industries?" he asked again, his voice dangerously soft. "Just marketing materials," I stammered. "Brochures for a new import and export division. Luca said it was a favor to help build my portfolio. He said he believed in my talent." Dae-hyun scoffed, a harsh, unforgiving sound in the quiet room. He pulled up one of my sleek brochure layouts. It was a glossy image of shipping containers and pristine warehouses. It looked completely normal until he zoomed in on the bottom right corner of the image. He ran a brutal extraction program. The pixelated corner shattered into lines of raw data. Numbers, dates, and international coordinates bled across the screen. My blood turned to pure ice. "This is not a marketing brochure," Dae-hyun murmured. "This is a shipping manifest for illegal weapons and untraceable cash." The truth didn't set me free. It buried me. Luca did not want my graphic design skills. He wanted my innocence. He used my computer, my name, and my naive trust to build a digital vault for a criminal empire. If the FBI found this, I was looking at 20 years in federal prison. If the Korean syndicate found it, I was looking at a closed casket. The cruelest betrayals do not come from monsters hiding in the dark. They come from the people who kiss you goodnight. I backed away from the glowing screen, my chest heaving with panic. He set me up, I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. He knew I kept backups of all my freelance work. He made me the perfect, disposable scapegoat. Dae-hyun stood up. He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. His massive frame trapped me against the cold glass window. The heat radiating from his chest was overwhelming, intoxicating. You are a walking liability, L. The FBI knows you have this drive. My rivals know you have this drive, and Luca is desperate enough to kill you tonight to cover his tracks. My vision blurred with terrified tears. So what happens now? Are you going to make me disappear too? He reached out. His large hand gripped the back of my neck, his thumb pressing firmly into my racing pulse. I do not destroy what belongs to me. I weaponize it. He pulled me away from the window and pushed me down into his leather desk chair. It was still warm from his body. He leaned over me, planting his massive hands on the armrests. His face was inches from mine, his dark eyes burning with lethal intent. "You are going to open these files," he commanded, "and you are going to rewrite the code." My breath hitched in my throat. I cannot do that. That is a massive federal crime. If I touch those files, I become an active participant in a Mafia syndicate. Dae-hyun leaned closer. His lips brushed against the sensitive shell of my ear. "You are already a participant, little bird. If we give the FBI the original files, they will lock you up just to force Luca out of hiding. If we give my rivals the files, they will slaughter us both. There is only one way out." I shivered, completely consumed by his proximity and his power. "What is it?" I breathed. "We change the drop locations," he whispered, his voice vibrating through my bones. "We reroute Luca's entire criminal network right into my hands. You are going to help me steal an empire." His hand slid from the back of my neck down to my bare collarbone. His touch was rough, branding me with his dark heat. The power dynamic in the room was shifting violently. I was no longer just a victim running from an evil ex-boyfriend. I was becoming the architect of his destruction. I placed my trembling hands on the keyboard. The keys felt heavy, like the trigger of a loaded gun. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, looking up into his pitch-black eyes. He did not answer with words. He leaned down and kissed me. It was a punishing, all-consuming kiss. It tasted like dark whiskey, danger, and absolute power. My hands gripped his forearms, feeling the hard muscles flex beneath his tailored sleeves. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathing heavily. "Rewrite the files. L." I turned back to the screen. My fingers began to fly across the keyboard. I was altering shipping coordinates. I was changing offshore bank routing numbers. I was erasing Luca Vance from existence and handing the keys to a Korean mafia king. Shin stood guard by the private elevator, a silent, deadly shadow. The silence in the massive penthouse was deafening. The only sound was the frantic clicking of my keyboard. Dae-hyun stood right behind me the entire time. I could feel the ghost of his breath on my neck. "What happens when Luca realizes the money and weapons are gone?" I asked, my voice shaking in the dark room. "He will panic," Dae-hyun murmured, trailing a single finger down my spine. "And panicked men make fatal mistakes. He thinks he is a predator. But by tomorrow morning, he will realize he is just the bait." It took 4 grueling hours. 4 hours of staring at encrypted data. 4 hours of crossing a line I could never uncross. When I finally entered the last fake coordinate, I hit save. "It is done," I whispered, pushing the laptop away. "I just stole $40 million for the Korean Mafia." Dae-hyun's hand clamped down heavily on my shoulder. A dark, terrifying sound of approval rumbled deep in his chest. "Good girl," he whispered. And then, The entire penthouse was plunged into absolute darkness. The power had been cut, not just the lights, the security cameras, the electronic locks, everything. A heavy, violent crash echoed from the front door. They found us. The darkness in the penthouse was absolute. My breath hitched in my throat as another heavy crash echoed from the front door. They were breaching the steel. Dae-hyun did not panic. His massive hand closed around my wrist, his grip bruising and desperate. "We are leaving," he whispered. Shin drew a heavy weapon from his jacket. The metallic click sounded terrifyingly loud in the dead silence. "I will hold them," Shin said smoothly. Moving into the shadows, Dae-hyun dragged me away from the glowing laptop. We did not go to the main elevator. He pulled me toward a hidden panel in the wall of his office. It slid open to reveal a narrow concrete stairwell. The descent was a blur of cold concrete and burning lungs. My heels scraped against the steps, echoing like gunshots in the dark. I was terrified, but as his large hand swallowed mine, I realized something sick and twisted. I felt safer running for my life with a Mafia boss than I ever did sitting in my quiet apartment. We burst into the underground garage. A heavy black armored SUV was idling in the shadows. Dae-hyun threw open the back door and shoved me inside. He slid in right beside me as the engine roared to life. Shin dropped into the driver's seat seconds later. There was blood on his collar, but I did not dare speak. The heavy vehicle tore out of the garage, shattering the quiet Manhattan street. We were playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. The drive was silent and suffocating. I sat pressed against the cold leather door. Dae-hyun sat in the center, his dark eyes tracking the rearview mirror. 3 times, Shin made sudden and violent turns to shake dark sedans off our tail. "Where are we going?" I finally whispered. "Upstate," Dae-hyun replied, not looking away from the glass. "A secure compound. No one knows about it except me and Shin." We drove for over 2 hours. The city lights bled away into endless stretches of black trees. The air inside the car was thick with adrenaline and something darker. Every time his leg brushed against mine, a jolt of heat shot straight to my core. The compound appeared out of nowhere. Massive iron gates, concrete walls, and a sprawling stone house hidden deep in the forest. It did not look like a home. It looked like a fortress built by a man who expected a war. Shin parked the heavy car. Dae-hyun led me inside. The air up here was freezing, smelling of crushed pine and damp earth. The house was beautiful but entirely sterile. "Take the second bedroom," Dae-hyun commanded as we stepped into the grand hallway. "Do not turn on any main lights. Do not stand near the windows." I nodded, my whole body trembling from exhaustion. He reached into his tailored jacket and pulled out a small black phone. "A burner. Keep this on you," he said, handing it to me. "Only Shin and I have the number." I took the cold plastic. But before I could step away, he caught my chin in his large hand. His rough thumb brushed over my bottom lip. His pitch-black eyes searched mine, looking for regret. The tragedy of survival is that you have to become a little bit of a monster to outlast the ones hunting you. I did not pull away. Instead, I leaned into his touch. "I am not sorry I rewrote those files," I whispered. A dark and dangerous heat flared in his eyes. "You will be," he murmured, "when you realize what I am willing to do to keep you." He dropped his hand and walked into his office. I went to the bedroom. The silence of the woods was deafening. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, staring at the dark ceiling. Then, my new phone vibrated against my chest. I froze. Only Dae-hyun and Shin had the number. I pulled it out and looked at the glowing screen. It was an unknown number. "I know you are with him. I know you stole the shipments. You have 24 hours before I burn that forest to the ground. Luca." My blood turned to pure ice. He knew where we were. I ran out of the bedroom and sprinted down the hall. I pushed open the heavy oak door to Dae-hyun's office. He was sitting behind a massive desk, surrounded by glowing screens. He looked up, his face a mask of cold fury. "He has a spy," he said before I could even speak. "Someone in my syndicate sold our location to Luca." I stumbled forward, clutching the phone. "He just texted me." I breathed. Dae-hyun stood up. He walked around the desk, his massive frame swallowing the light in the room. He took the phone from my shaking hand and tossed it away. Then he backed me up against the heavy wooden door. His hands slammed flat against the wood on either side of my head. He trapped me completely. "I am leaving at dawn," he whispered, his voice rough and dangerous. "I am meeting with the Vulov family to finish this deal. I am going to trade the network you built for Luca's life. You cannot go." I gasped, my hands gripping his hard chest. "It is a trap. He knows you are going." "I do not care," he murmured, burying his face in the crook of my neck. "I will walk through hell if it means he never touches you again." His lips dragged along my collarbone. It was a kiss of absolute desperation. I stopped fighting the pull. I let my hands slide up into his thick, dark hair. I pulled his mouth to mine. The kiss was raw. It tasted like violent promises and impending death. He kissed me like a man who knew he might not come back. And I kissed him like a woman who could not live without him. When morning came, he was already gone. I stood alone in the massive and silent house. The woods outside were perfectly still. My burner phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. I walked over and picked it up, my hands shaking violently. "Do not bother looking for him, Elle. He is already dead." Open the front door. My heart stopped completely. And then, the power in the compound was cut. The house plunged into absolute blackness. The power died with a heavy, final clunk. Absolute darkness swallowed the entire compound. I stood frozen in the massive kitchen, my chest heaving in the freezing air. My burner phone cast a pale, sickly light across the marble counter. Open the front door. I did not move. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears like a roaring river. And then, the horrifying sound of glass shattering echoed from the back of the house. He was inside. The terrifying thing about predators is that they always assume their prey will not bite back. They forget that a cornered animal is the most dangerous thing in the dark. I backed away, my bare feet completely silent on the cold hardwood floor. I needed to run. I needed to hide in the shadows. Heavy boots crunched over the broken glass in the distance. "Ella?" Luca's voice drifted through the dark halls. It sounded casual, almost friendly, like we were playing a game of hide-and-seek in a nightmare. I slipped into the main hallway and pressed my back against the freezing stone wall. I could hear his footsteps moving closer, slow, deliberate. He was dragging something metallic against the floorboards, a terrifying, scraping sound that made my pulse hammer wildly. "You cannot hide from me," he called out into the blackness. "I have already won. Your new boyfriend walked right into my trap. He is currently sitting in a warehouse with 30 armed men who want him dead." My breath hitched in my throat. The tiny sound gave me away. A strong hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed my throat. I screamed, but the sound was violently crushed as he slammed me against the wall. Luca stepped into the faint moonlight filtering through the high windows. He looked completely unhinged. His eyes were wild, and his expensive designer suit was wrinkled and damp with sweat. "Hello, beautiful," he whispered, his brutal grip tightening on my neck. "Let go of me," I choked out, clawing uselessly at his hand. He smiled, a cold and empty expression. "Not until you fix the massive mess you made." He pulled a phone from his pocket and shoved it in my face. It was a live video feed. Dae-hyun was sitting at a metal table in a massive, dark warehouse. He was completely surrounded by men aiming heavy rifles at his chest. He looked perfectly calm, but I knew the brutal truth. He was trapped. I did not know it yet, but everything I thought was real was about to shatter. "Call him!" Luca hissed, pressing the freezing metal of a gun against my temple. "Tell him to transfer the shipment codes back to me right now, or I make a single call, and they blow his head off." My hands shook violently as I pulled out my burner phone. I dialed the only number saved in the device. It rang twice before he answered. "Elle." His voice was deep, steady. and entirely too calm for a man staring down 30 guns. Dae-hyun, I sobbed, the terrified tears finally spilling over my cheeks. He is here. Luca is inside the house, and he has a gun to my head. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Then, Dae-hyun spoke. His voice dropped an octave, vibrating with pure and lethal intent. Put him on speaker. I held the phone out with shaking hands. Luca leaned in, his twisted smile turning into an arrogant sneer. It is over, Kang. Give me back my money, and maybe I let her live. Dae-hyun laughed. It was a dark, chilling sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. You think you trapped me, Luca, but you are too stupid to realize I brought the cage. What are you talking about? Luca demanded, his grip on my throat faltering slightly. Did you really think I would leave what belongs to me unprotected? Dae-hyun's voice echoed through the dark hallway. Say hello to the Baekho unit. Before Luca could even process the words, the heavy front door exploded inward. The solid oak splintered into 1,000 flying pieces. Blinding white tactical lights pierced the dark hallway, cutting through the blackness. Luca panicked. He yanked me backward, pressing the gun harder against my skull. I will kill her! He screamed blindly into the blinding light. A massive silhouette stepped through the ruined doorway. It was not a tactical soldier. It was Dae-hyun. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and he was holding a heavy black pistol leveled straight at us. He had never been at the warehouse. The video feed was a recorded decoy. Let her go, Dae-hyun commanded, his deep voice slicing through the absolute chaos. If you shoot me, you hit her, Luca screamed back, using my body as a human shield. I do not miss, Dae-hyun replied softly. His pitch-black eyes locked onto mine. They held no fear, no hesitation, just absolute, terrifying certainty. Drop, he whispered. I did not think. I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I simply let my legs collapse beneath me. My dead weight pulled me down, slipping out of Luca's grip just enough to clear the line of fire. The gunshot was deafening. It tore through the narrow hallway like a clap of thunder. Luca screamed, a high and agonizing sound. Blood sprayed across the pristine stone wall as the heavy bullet shattered his right shoulder. He dropped his weapon and collapsed to the floor in a heap of pure agony. I scrambled backward over the floorboards, gasping for desperate air. Dae-hyun crossed the hallway in 2 massive strides. He did not even look at me. He kicked Luca's fallen gun into the dark corner. Then he pressed the smoking barrel of his pistol directly between Luca's eyes. Please, Luca begged, sobbing violently in the dark. Please do not kill me. Dae-hyun stood over him like a god of death. His sharp face was carved from unforgiving stone. His eyes were empty voids of violence. The Baekho tactical unit swarmed into the house, securing the perimeter in absolute, terrifying silence. But I could not look at the armed men. I could only look at the beautiful monster who had just saved my life and wonder what he was going to do to him. The metallic smell of blood hung heavy in the freezing hallway. Luca was writhing on the stone floor, sobbing violently into his own hands. Dae-hyun did not flinch. He did not blink. He just kept the smoking barrel of his gun pressed firmly against the side of Luca's skull. Take him, Dae-hyun commanded, his voice a low and terrifying rumble. 2 massive men in black tactical gear stepped forward out of the shadows. They hauled Luca up by his unbroken arm, dragging him roughly toward the ruined doorway. He was screaming, begging me to help him. I did not say a single word. I just watched the man who tried to destroy my life get swallowed by the dark woods. Dae-hyun holstered his weapon and turned to me. The lethal emptiness in his eyes vanished the second he looked at my face. He dropped to his knees on the cold floor right in front of me. His massive hands gently framed my jaw, his rough thumbs wiping away my tears. You are safe now, he whispered. His warm breath cascading over my freezing skin. I promise you, he will never touch you again. We left the shattered compound before the sun even began to rise over the tree line. Shin drove us in absolute silence to a different safe house. It was a sleek and silent penthouse buried deep in the heart of Manhattan. It was his personal sanctuary. And now, it was mine. I spent the next 2 days wrapped in his massive bed, listening to the distant echoes of his revenge. He did not try to hide the brutal reality of his world from me anymore. I could hear fragments of his phone calls through the heavy oak doors. I thought I was simply moving on, but I was actually stepping into the dark. Luca sang like a bird. He gave up every supplier, every hidden bank account, and every name tied to Vance Industries. He thought he was buying his freedom. He thought the Korean syndicate was going to relocate him to a sunny beach in South America with a brand new identity. He was entirely wrong. On the third night, Dae-hyun walked into the quiet bedroom. He was wearing a simple black shirt and dark jeans. He looked exhausted, but the heavy and violent tension in his shoulders was finally gone. "It is finished," he said softly, sitting down heavily on the edge of the mattress. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a trembling whisper. "Relocated," Dae-hyun replied, his dark eyes meeting mine with terrifying calm. "A secure underground facility in a country that does not exist on any official map. He has a bed and 3 meals a day, but he will never see the sun again." A violent shiver ran down my spine. It was not fear. It was the terrifying realization of absolute power. Dae-hyun had not just saved my life. He had erased my nightmare from the face of the earth. 6 months passed. 6 months of rebuilding my shattered life from the ashes. I did not go back to my tiny apartment in Brooklyn. I stayed in the glass fortress high above the city. I built my design firm back up, using syndicate money to crush my old competitors. I stopped looking over my shoulder when I walked down the busy streets, because I knew the most dangerous predator in Manhattan was walking right beside me. People think that falling in love with a monster makes you a helpless victim. They do not realize that when the monster loves you back, you become the queen of the underworld. It was a rainy Tuesday night. The city below us was a beautiful blur of neon and gray shadows. I was standing by the massive window, watching the rain slide down the thick glass. Heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor behind me. Dae-hyun wrapped his massive arms around my waist, pulling my back tight against his solid chest. He buried his face deep in the crook of my neck. His warm breath sent a violent rush of heat straight to my core. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured, his large hands sliding slowly up my stomach. "Us," I whispered, leaning my head back against his broad shoulder. "I am thinking about that night at the club. If I had not grabbed you, I would probably be dead right now." He spun me around in his arms. His pitch-black eyes were blazing with that familiar, terrifying possession. "If you had not grabbed me, I would have torn that club apart until I found you," he growled. "You were mine the exact second you walked into my line of sight." He pushed me back against the cold glass window. His mouth crashed down on mine, stealing the desperate breath from my lungs. It was a kiss of absolute ownership. It tasted like expensive whiskey, heavy rain, and dark devotion. There was no escape from him. There was no running away. And the terrifying truth was, I did not want to. I tangled my fingers in his thick, dark hair and pulled his mouth closer. The ruthless man who destroyed my enemies was now the only home I had left. I had signed my death warrant for 10 seconds of revenge. But Kang Dae-hyun tore up the contract and wrote a brand new one in blood, a contract that bound me to him forever.